So, in a couple minutes, Martha Blessing will be dialing in, and we'll have her shortly. We'll be back.
See you soon.
And we're back with Martha Blessing as our special guest.
Hello, Martha.
Hi, Chris. Hi, John.
Hi. So today on the Humble Warrior podcast, we have Martha Blessing. Martha is an author, speaker, medium, and medical medium who has helped countless people transform their health and their lives through her intuitive readings, consultations, coaching, workshops, and books. Martha has devoted 25 years to mainstream medicine as a registered nurse in community health, hospice care, and as the director of an Alzheimer's unit. Her latest book, God is a Pink Cloud, she shares the spiritual mystical adventure and the practices that led her to reverse fibromyalgia and get herself out of a wheelchair when doctors told her she would never walk again. Welcome to the Humble Warrior podcast, Martha.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yes, your story is very inspiring, Martha, and glad you took time out of your busy day to join us.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So I'm interested in understanding. I was reading your background, and one in hospice care. I'm a big believer in hospice because in the past 5 years, my wife, both her parents have passed, and we've gone through the whole hospice process. But I want to know how you made the transition from mainstream medicine as a registered nurse into becoming a medical medium and a spiritual development teacher and healer. I think that's really fascinating how you made that transition. How did that happen?
You have no idea how fascinating it's been. It's been really, really interesting. And honestly, this, it sounds a little bit corny, but I really followed the spiritual path that was sort of set in front of me. And I look back in hindsight, and there were pieces that I loved about nursing,
mm-hmm.
but there were little light bulb moments that went off at every step. And so when I first got into nursing school, that was an answer to one prayer. And then I got injured working as a nurse, and that started a 10-year journey into daily chronic pain.
Whoa.
To having these 3 back surgeries, to getting diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And when you have those sorts of things happening in your physical body and in your life, you start searching.
Yeah.
You start looking for answers. And I really believe that everybody, it's obviously happening all over the country and the world. And things can happen so quickly and so easily that you might miss it. But I was just really, really blessed and gifted to be able to have something presented to me, something as simple as going and taking a yoga class, and then that led to me going up to Kripalu Center in Massachusetts, and then little things would happen there, and I said, "Oh, pay attention." And it really happened because I didn't cling to medicine. I didn't cling to what they offered me and say, "Oh my God, this is it."
Yeah.
And so each step along the way, something kind of divine happened, and I followed it. I was willing to be open. And come to find out, this was just my true nature, my true path. My grandmother, on my father's side, was a medium and lived at Lilydale Assembly in Lilydale, New York. It's a fairly well-known spiritualist community. And my father's cousin was a healer and a chiropractor in Buffalo, in Western New York, in the early 1900s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And back then, I'm sure nobody knew what that was going on, or was that widely accepted back then, or?
What's really interesting? You can go back and Google a lot of things from the 1900s now.
Really?
But you won't find, I mean, you can go back and search the internet and find like physicians in the 1900s and their practices, you can't Google my father's cousin because they didn't put signs up. They didn't have a, Dr. G. Allen chiropractor. They didn't advertise. There's very little information that we can find about him and his practice because it wasn't out in the open, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's probably because it's just the way society looked at it at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
it's not something that you want to let everybody know. This is what I'm doing.
They were really considered witch doctors.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're seeing that still today. I mean, in a way. I mean, it's becoming more widely accepted, and it's one of the reasons John and I do this show, because of seeing the value, like in the profession, like you're bringing out to the world, that this stuff works. I mean, this is where we're going, and the more education we can bring, and kind of like, I don't like to use the word dumb it down, but to say, folks, wake up. This stuff exists out there. You can heal yourself. You don't always have to do it the traditional way.
People are still fearful, though. I still get a lot of that from people. The fears that they have and the way they were raised, and that's a lot of what I go into with my private mentoring and coaching programs now with people, is what I call the 4 C's, and the clarity and the cause and the beliefs and the consciousness. Because, and one of my mantras is, you can't, if you don't believe it for yourself, no one can get it or find it for you.
Right. Yep.
Like, it has to start with that belief somewhere, and unfortunately, so much of what people believe is that it's not possible.
Right.
That it's something that you have to live with. I also reversed a very rare, was diagnosed with a very rare blood cancer.
Wow.
But even going back to that with the fibromyalgia, and what I talk about in my book is, there was just this little whisper and spark within me that allowed me to follow and believe in what was put in front of me. Well, I didn't understand it, and there wasn't a lot of, now yoga and chiropractic and all of these things are maybe not completely mainstream. They are. Yoga and chiropractic are.
Yeah, I would say they're yoga and chiropractic.
Dr. Oz talks about Ayurveda and chakras and things like that, but I get the sense that people see it more as a dabbling or an adjunct to something, and they don't really believe in that power within themselves, or that energy and that ability within themselves to transform their reality.
What would you attribute when you say that whisper, that spark? What would you attribute? What is that? What does that mean to you?
That is my soul.
Okay.
That is my soul begging to be expressed out in the world.
So we just got done talking about...
He's going to have fun with this. And Martha, you know me a little bit, so John, just go ahead. I know where you're going.
No, we just got done talking about fear, and moving forward and not being paralyzed by fear, and also failure. And this little spark in your soul and hearing your voice, what were you doing? I mean, Chris and I are talking, and Chris had kind of talked about in the past that spark was there, but he didn't listen to it. He was following a different path. What led you? How did that spark in you reveal itself so that you could, or what were you doing so that you could listen to that and hear that voice
and keep going down your path?
It's funny. I have a Georgia O'Keeffe quote, hanging on my wall, and it says, I've been absolutely terrified every moment of my life, and I've never let it keep me from doing a single thing I wanted to do.
Wow.
And that really, truly, I had to get into, I was so unhappy.
Yeah.
I was so unhappy and so emotionally void. Like, how is this my life?
Yeah.
How is this my life? How did this turn out this way? And I just had to have answers. I had to know. I guess when something was presented in front of me, I didn't know. I had no guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
My fear was a choice between staying stuck where I was, moving forward,
Mm-hmm.
couldn't be any worse than where I was.
Yeah. That's.
I mean, that sounds kind of awful, but
Why? Go ahead.
After a bit of time, when that happened enough times, and in the beginning the investment was kind of small.
Right.
Oh, I'll just go step over this way. It's only one step. And it really always is only one step at a time, but we think we need to see. Like if you're going from New York to California, you can't see from New York to California. You can only see from, New York to Ohio.
Right.
It's just these little, and so the fear, truly, the fear, as I see it, is that God, Source, Spirit, Holy Spirit, whatever, wants to do us in.
Oh.
It's not having trust.
Right.
That it's going to turn out okay, and
right.
that it's a benevolent, good thing, that you're holy and divine, and your soul is, and that there's a plan for you.
Right.
And that what divinity wants is way greater than anything we could think of.
I think that's really interesting because I love your analogy about if you're traveling from New York to California, because so often we want to know where we're going, what's in front of me. And it's further down the road and the things that you can't see, but you want to see it. I want to see California. I want to see those mountains. I want to see the ocean before I even get there. And you forget about that path that you have to take and see everything that you're on that road before you actually get there. We kind of dismiss that because for some reason in our society, we got to get to the end. We got to know where we're going to end up before we even start the journey.
Yeah, hurry up and get there.
Yeah.
And you said another word that's very dear to my heart that, as we go down this path is trust. And there's a quote that I like is, be your truth and trust that all is in divine order. And I think it's easier said than done, but for someone like yourself, you really had no choice. You were going this way. And I think what you said that I'm picking up is it really all starts with each one of us to have that belief system within ourselves that we are actually that powerful.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, the stuff that happens to us or whatever, we lose that along the way, but we need to get that back. And it seems like, of all the guests that we've had, each of us has an individual thing that gets our attention. Some it's a physical ailment that you've overcome, or it can be whatever. But I think it's just, what's music to my ears, what you're saying is, something brought you to where you said, you know what, I'm unhappy and I've had enough. And I'm just going to have to put my belief system and trust in the way that we weren't raised, right? That it's all going to work out. There is no map that says go here, go here, go here, like a physical map. But what you've done is you went somewhere and that led to somewhere else and that led to somewhere else and it led to somewhere else because you had that belief system. And now we're fortunate to be talking about your journey here because of everything you've done.
Yeah, the mechanism is that trust. The mechanism is I talk about and teach about the experience of us being in our physical bodies, and on several different levels. Number one, for me, my path has been, because I came through nursing and Western medicine, and that, my ancestors are on that side of it. It's about changing the face of medicine in my lifetime, helping to be a part of that paradigm shift, and teaching people to use their physical bodies as an educator. It's an education if you have a symptom somewhere, and to move towards it rather than away from it. There's information in it. And that's one of the things I learned, in that process with pain and back surgeries, and was to move forward and to listen and to get the message, and could lead me to where the next step was, or where I was, falling down, so to speak. And we spend so much time thinking that the brain is the master organ that should be making the decisions, but it's really, we have choice A or choice B on any given day or moment, or when there's a dilemma or a choice to be made, and we can make that choice better by tuning into our physical senses and seeing which. I used to teach people in my store when they'd come in, they couldn't decide which crystal to buy, and I'd say, you know what, just stop looking at them. They sit there with their eyes and their brain focusing on it. I can't figure it out. Which one? I said, you know what? Close your eyes. I said, first of all, give me those stones. Close your eyes. And just take a couple of breaths. Just take your mind out of the process. Just stand here grounded for a minute with a few breaths. And I'd give them back the stones, and I'd put one in each hand. I'd be like, close your eyes and just stand there and breathe. Don't think about making a choice. Just breathe and feel.
Right.
And after a couple minutes, I'd say, which one of your hands feels like more happy and more excited? Which hand feels like you're loved up? And they go, oh, this one. I go, well, then that's the stone for you.
Right. That's a great story. I think, it's a perfect illustration of the challenges that we kind of face every day, in that we are so accustomed, I know I'm so accustomed to facts and figures and black and white and things that are very tangible and that I can touch and I can understand. And when it comes to understanding ourselves and our senses and our emotions and our beliefs, it's something that it's not tangible. So it becomes, it's almost like this abstract thing that becomes difficult to comprehend. And then you say, what I do a lot of times, say, all right, well, if I can't understand it, I'm going to find the understanding for it. I'm going to find the real answer. And sometimes it just takes, like you said, Martha, in that example you gave, just feeling it. And I think that's kind of where I know sometimes I just get lost, because I've been struggling a lot lately. I'm trying to feel more. And I think that's just with a lot of people, it's a challenge. And I think what I wanted to go into was this idea of being a medium. And first, there's a lot of people that listen that are new to this space. What is a medium?
Yeah. So a medium is someone who has the ability, they've trained themselves, and we all have this ability. It's a choice whether or not we turn it on or turn it off. It's the ability to connect with spirit, to the other side, across the veil, as I would say, to other dimensions, and communicate with loved ones who have passed on. But it's also the ability to connect with other spirit guides that weren't necessarily, say, a loved one or someone that we knew. And so I've had that ability actually since I was born. But I became aware of it, really conscious of it. More so, it was intensified when my grandmother died when I was 5 years old.
Mm.
And I started sensing messages and things from her from the other side after she passed when I was 6. And that's very confusing for a 6-year-old little girl.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, you don't know what that is.
Yeah, you don't talk about it too
No.
much either.
Or if you do, your parents think you have an imaginary friend, or what are you talking about? They just kind of dismiss it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets dismissed, and then it really became came back. I really couldn't push it away anymore when I was in nursing school, and that's really where the medical medium part comes in. When I was doing my clinical rotations in the hospital, I would walk down the hall at Buffalo General Hospital, and as I would pass by the room, I would get a message as to the mental, emotional, or spiritual cause of the person's physical illness in that room.
Mm.
And that was pretty unnerving for the most part.
I could imagine.
Couldn't wait
Now,
to get out
did
of
you
there.
even realize what was happening at the time? Like, was that still a very new sensation for you where you're like, why am I getting this information, or what is happening?
Yeah. I was like, okay, fine, but that's whatever. I'm not going to be doing anything with this.
Yeah.
There was no inclination for me to do anything with it, and that's really truly a part of what happened in my path and my healing journey was how my book got the title God is a Pink Cloud. Was I had been hearing voices, and I had been seeing colors and seeing auras and different things for a while, but it really started intensifying, and I started getting just more and more messages and seeing more and more things. And I was sitting in my neurologist's office in a wheelchair, and he looked at me and he said, I'm sorry, I had already had one back surgery, and I described this week of, really it was like a mystical spiritual movie that I was producing, directing, and acting in when I sneezed in the shower one morning. That's what happened. Without giving away the whole story in the book. But I refused to go to the emergency room. And so for an entire week I had this excruciating pain and I couldn't walk, but I was getting all of this information and all of these messages, and it really was like a movie. And then it kind of slowed down and stopped, and 5-6 days later I couldn't walk. And so I said, well, I guess I really do have to go now. And I sat there in the doctor's office, and he said, I'm sorry, this isn't like the last time where we just cut you open and fixed it. We can't fix this. And in that instant, I saw this pink cloud come down and wrap around the doctor and like protect him and separate us and protect me and separate me from his words and his beliefs. And I heard a voice say, don't take this. You don't have to take this.
What is that voice to you? God, since God's the pink cloud, or when you say that voice?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. At the time, I thought I was having like side effects of, codeine overdose.
You think you could be going crazy?
Yeah, I really truly did, but it didn't go away. And that, it was the most, again, this is that trusting trusting with your senses in your physical body. And it was so real. It was so real. But I could feel the benevolence. I knew it was okay to trust this voice and to trust this experience.
And I have to keep asking a lot of questions because I'm intrigued by
Sure.
all this and the voice, because I can relate to some of it. Where, and for you it's God, which is good. Me too. Where do you think that comes from, though? The heart, the soul, the mind?
Where does the voice come from, or
Yeah.
where does God come from?
Both. Because the voice and God are one, right? You're saying, where does that come from, though? I mean, where? So for myself, I've described it as coming from the heart.
A very subtle difference. I believe it comes through the heart, but it's the soul that's speaking.
Okay, it's through the heart.
Yes. I believe the energy and the voice of the soul comes through the heart.
Cool.
Comes out of and through the heart, so that when you know that it's the soul that's speaking, you know that it's come through that vibration and energy and consciousness of the heart, and that is your God self, your higher self.
Is there a physical feeling that goes with that?
There is for me.
Okay.
There is for me.
I
mean, I can't universally say that what it is for anyone else. I know how it is for me.
Okay. Because I always wonder, I do a lot of thinking. And sometimes I don't know what is kind of a voice versus my voice just in my head saying, this is where you're going. And I think it's a hard thing to separate between what your mind is telling you versus what your soul or spirit is telling you.
And yeah, what I was just going to add to what John was saying, and maybe this is what I like hear you at, Martha, is I think you mentioned kind of like when you're in the hospital and that pink cloud, that voice is just so profound. It's coming from a higher place. And I think, I don't know, I could just go from my experience. It's so profound and so powerful that it's like you love it and you want it to be with you all the time, but it's just not. I mean, that's from my experience, but it comes. And that's why I was kind of go to John's point is, I think the voice, though, sometimes maybe we misinterpret the voice that's coming from the mind or the brain and how you distinct those two. But I think there is a big distinction. I just think because one is so profound over the other that, to like you and I were saying is you think you're going, one could think you're going crazy.
Oh, yeah.
But
when I sat in that room that day, and what I can say about experiences, I mean, that was many years ago, what I can say about experiences, even like around cancer, which was much more recent. But that day, I felt just such deep love in that message. I felt this warm, soft energy just like hugging me and patting me on the shoulder like, it's going to be okay. It's going to, it was just like the only way I could trust it was that it just gave me so much, really a hug, like so much peace. I really feel that that's what grace is.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, I was like, okay. Because, again, what was the alternative? Like, here I was again in this really crappy place.
Right.
Yeah.
So do I want to listen to the doctor?
Right.
And believe that, or do I want to believe that there's really something different than this?
Right.
I mean, what's my risk?
Right.
Right.
What's my risk? My risk to not believe it is to sit in this wheelchair the rest of my life. It was kind of a no-brainer.
Right.
Even though it didn't make sense.
Right. So you hear the voice, you're in the wheelchair, this comfort comes over you, this deep love. What next? Can you, like, I'm not saying maybe immediately, but what were your marching orders, or what did you do to get out of the wheelchair?
I spent a lot of time, rejecting medicine, I spent a lot of time in meditation. I spent a lot of time in stillness and some praying, some begging, okay, you've said this, so show me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know what you want me to do. Show me or tell me or give me something to do. And actually, I spent 8 months waiting for, I couldn't work. I couldn't do anything. I was home for 8 months in a wheelchair, waiting for my insurance companies and workers' comp, and, they just kept going back and forth and back and forth.
Right.
And they wouldn't do a surgery because the doctor had documented that this was irreversible. So they kept arguing about it. And I had a lot of free time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes that's our
I couldn't really go anywhere or do anything. I was in pain, a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And I couldn't walk. So to me, that was God's way of slowing me down and getting me out of my head and pulling me into my body.
Mm-hmm.
And learning to get the messages and learning to listen. So years later I can teach this to people. But what actually ended up happening, and I would see the doctors and I would just say, I'm going to be the miracle of your career. That's what I would tell him. And he'd look at me like she's crazy, and that was it. But what really ended up happening was 8 months later, the doctor said I had, the reason why this was happening was my first surgery, I had an L4, L5 herniation. The second one, I had a S1, my S1, that little tail was shattered in the spine, in the tailbone. And so they said, there were fragments floating around, and it couldn't be repaired.
But that makes my back hurt just hearing it right now.
Yeah. But I just kept doing my thing and doing my meditation and doing my practices. And then they said that they believed that they could reduce some of my pain by doing surgery on the L5 part of that area. And when they went in to do the decompression and the surgery for that L5 disc area, they just found that what was on the scans of that S1 was not what was in my physical body. and that it was intact. There was more of it intact than what they thought. And so when I came out of surgery, I had my sensation back. This is something that I talk a lot about now in my classes and workshops and my programs and mentoring and coaching, and that is the 4 levels of consciousness and healing. And what did I do with my meditations, with my practices, with my beliefs? How was I able to change the actual physical consciousness and vibration in myself?
Right.
Was I able to? Is that, I can't say 100% emphatically, but I do believe that that's what happens. And we see that happening. We see documentation of those things happening, despite Western medicine not really wanting to go there.
Right.
Yeah.
Even because, again, it's like you say, the black and white.
Right.
Yeah.
That their world is black and white.
Right. There's science
and so
behind it.
the black and white X-ray said this is how it is.
In a lot of way that could be how people approach life too. Black and white. I kind of use sleepwalking through the day or being awake and being present. I find your story very inspiring. And I'm thinking about like other people we've had on the podcast and kind of relating it to my own story. And what's unique is we each have our own story, but it's interesting how God or whatever one's belief system wants to get our attention. Through some of it's through the physical body, through me, it goes with this show. It's like for the last 8 to 9 years, I've failed 3 startup companies. I lost a marriage. I mean, God got my attention, and I was not going to go back to the way I was living. And in a way, when I stopped everything, that was kind of like my wheelchair to figure everything out. I mean, that's what makes this, what we do, just actually unbelievably and cool. It's because, like you said, we all have this intuitive or whatever it is. It's are we choosing to listen? Are we choosing, if you're at the place of wit's end or unhappy, are we choosing to give ourselves a timeout? And if we don't give ourselves a timeout, someone's going to do, or God or whatever you want to call, is going to give you that opportunity for that timeout so you can live out your life and live out your purpose and have a purposeful life. And it seems like that's what's happened to you.
So the message I got right when you said that was it's not a timeout, it's a time in.
Oh, okay. Right.
And what we're actually doing is spending most of our waking hours in timeout.
Interesting.
Not plugged in.
Got it.
So the wake-up call is that we're getting plugged back in.
Yes. And what I like about, and I'm just going our stories to our stories, because what I liked about what I heard is when you were in this place, you already had practices in place. And that's kind of, our theme here and what we're trying to educate people is spiritual fitness. So you had prayer to lean on, you had meditation to lean on to get you through these difficult times. And that's what's going to lead to kind of the next question, Martha, is what are your daily practices? What are your daily spiritual practices or rituals or whatever you want to call them that would say keep you in this time in way of life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I am so lucky and blessed to have created a life around spiritual practices. And I had one of my friends, since I sold my store a year ago, and she's like, wow, you have such freedom, and you still get up at 6 o'clock in the morning? And I'm like, yeah, I'm up at 6 o'clock. She can't imagine why I would be up at 6 o'clock when I don't have to be. And it's like, because I number one, I love those wee hours of the morning, and it's a sacred space in what the universe is, the switch from the moonlight to the sunlight.
Mm.
And the change in that. So I'm up and I'm, having my hot water or hot tea or, something to get me going. And I'm in my meditation room. I have a whole room devoted to that sacred space, and the energy is just beautiful in there. And I talk about that being in the beginning. I learned about yoga. I learned about meditation. I learned about prayer, and it was a discipline. I had to discipline myself to do it. And eventually, when I realized what I was really doing, having that sacred relationship with myself, with my soul, it became a devotion. That I want to do it. So every morning I'm in my room doing, I'm always doing a mantra of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
And I sit in meditation. I can sit there for hours. It's hard for me to understand when people say they can't sit and they can't do it, because that's my place. That's my connection that allows me to walk out of that room and walk out into the world and stay centered and grounded in my physical body and my presence and the truth, my truth. Mm-hmm. As I go out in the world, because what I see out in the world is different than what my reality is. In a lot of ways, when I see people living with pain, when I see people living in crisis. Mm. So that's what holds my North Star. Mm-hmm. My yoga practice and being out in nature.
You mentioned, you're the first person, I think, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but you mentioned something that's at the core of my practice that I don't think we've had another guest talk about this, but prayer and what that means. Because I think people, how did you teach yourself to pray, right? Because, I don't think, people, when they hear prayer, what does that mean? Like, when you say prayer, what does that mean for you?
That's a really good, it's a good question, because it's more of a conversation than anything else. And making a distinction, especially like when it comes to healing, it's one of the things that you get on social media, get on Facebook or wherever, and especially my local community, I've been in this healing community for 30 years, and people will put up there such and such, prayers, please send prayers, please send healing. Mm-hmm. And I think to myself, you're already healed. Like, they're praying for healing to a God or a source that doesn't even see them as sick. So it's a lot of times prayer, I have found, for a lot of people tends to be, and I was actually a prayer chaplain at two different times in my life. And sometimes the prayer only comes in desperation. Right. The prayer only comes when there's something wrong, or there's confusion, or, I don't know what to do kind of prayers. Versus having a conversation with God and that divine energy on a daily basis. And to me, it's my prayers are most often about being aligned with the consciousness and vibration of the one heart and the one mind. That I'm being aligned with what that truth is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the core center of my practice, that is at the center of my practice. And it was interesting because this came in first before the other stuff, meditation, yoga, reading, writing. The first thing that came into my practice was at the age of, in my mid-20s, was I do the rosary every day. And been doing that for 20 years. And I think you said it and head on of what prayer is really all about. And for me, which started off as a discipline and just to do it and just to keep me on the path, eventually turned into conversations and a relationship with one may call Source or God. This is totally from a non-religious perspective. But it would first start off as a discipline, and then again building into a relationship. And then it's gotten to the place when you do know where that voice does come in, you know it's from Source or God or universe, whatever it is. And I think if, the education or something that just hearing this conversation with you that's the play. I mean, that is the easiest place to start. It's just not knowing how to do it, right? Meditation, people get, intimidated by that, sitting for hours or breathing. Prayer you can do any time of day, anywhere. You can do it walking, you can do it sitting, you can do it on the toilet. I mean, you could do it wherever you need to do it. But I think what you brought up is a good point, is I think prayer is the way it's been maybe taught is, oh, God, help me. I need to help with the situation, which is fine. But if that's the only time you're using it, then are you really building that conversation piece, or however you want to do it, or really tapping into the source?
It would be like, I give the comparison of, you don't see, your friend Sally for 6 months, a year. You don't talk to her, you don't call her, you don't get together for lunch, you don't ever see her. And then all of a sudden you call her one day and you go, Sally, I'm having surgery, can you take me to the hospital?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like how she might, but how likely is she to do that because you have not been connected to her for 6-12 months? It's because you don't, not because she doesn't want to, but the connection, the energy, the vibration has not been there.
That's a good analogy.
She might not even remember who you are,
Right. Especially if she knows billions of people.
Right, I was going to say, because, Sally's pretty popular.
Yeah.
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 So it's really about, again, developing that friendship with the God that lives within you. Wanting to have that friendship.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And not, this is, again, what I'm teaching is the answer's not outside you, the answer's inside you.
Right.
But you're never going to get it if you don't have a relationship with that inside you.
And I am
with yourself.
And I'm so glad you brought this up, because I think this is part of when we talk about spiritual fitness and building a team, okay? And this is going to go into my next question for you. Is sometimes, it can be easy to say, oh, you just have all the answers within, right? But sometimes we need help getting there. And, John and I have talked about this, and I've kind of shared, kind of my team around me of, holistic professionals that help you get to that place for whatever reason, because we need sometimes information from people that can help us connect there. And and that's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that if someone's building a team, you could be a good team member in helping someone do that in part of your services and your teaching. Am I correct in that?
Absolutely. That. I'll tell you what I did for years. I got out of that physical pain. I got out of the fibromyalgia. I got out of all that, and how I did that and how I came through it was all these pieces were revealed to me, and I ended up doing a lot of different trainings, becoming a certified healing touch practitioner. I was a clinical Ayurvedic practitioner and had a wellness center, and did all of this and saw clients for many years. And how I got to what I do now and why I do it and the way that I do it is because for so many years, people just came and plopped themselves down on my table or plopped themselves in the chair. And like Western medicine, they either want to be told what to do or told how it was going to be. Give me the answers. Give me this. Boom. This is all I need to do right here, right now. Boom.
Right. They want the answer. And hey, I was a plopper too when I first started. I've been getting energy work for 15 years. I remember my first experience, who this woman eventually became my mentor and a very good friend. But, I just wanted to, tell everybody I was a plopper. I mean, this is a journey we're talking about. So keep going, Martha. Yep.
Yeah. So what happens, though, is that they, when they come in and they plop, you're the fixer.
Right.
And so you have to go back to the belief at that level. And their belief is at that level is that everything is outside of them and someone else has the answer and someone else is going to fix it. Which, granted, the Reiki is valuable. It's wonderful. The acupuncture is wonderful, but honestly, it's not going to produce a different result than Western medicine if they don't change the belief of who's in charge and what the outcome can be, because they just keep going with an idea of fear and surrender every time they plop themselves down.
And let me tell you, this is a great conversation because I'm going to go back to my plopping days. Going down this journey and building my team and the way you're describing it is perfect because what was happening to me is I was working with a bunch of different modalities. And I was like, oh, I'd go do this one, I'd do this one, I'd do this one to find the answer. And what I was realizing was happening over time is you're right. I was also giving my power away. I didn't realize how powerful I was. And the professionals around you, and I think this is what's important because what you said, and this is what John and I talked about. How do you find somebody that you really want to work with? And I think well, I'm telling you, anybody right now, and now Martha, you're going to give your information here shortly, is I would recommend Martha because you're coming out of the gate saying to the person, you do have the power within. And I'm just a teacher or healer or whatever, one calls themselves to help you get there. And I think when someone's going down that path to change or maybe look at like trying this type of this path or holistic healing, whatever you want to call it, this is a journey. The spiritual journey, it's a journey. It takes time. It's not a quick fix. And if you find a professional that is telling you have the power within and they can help you, that's a good start. So, and I guess that's going to lead to my next question, Martha. We have listeners all over the country, men and women. Do you do stuff over the phone, or are you just seeing clients in an office, or how do you work today?
Actually, most of my work is over the phone or via Skype. I'm very, very blessed to have gifts and talents to be able to do readings and to get information. Doesn't matter how far away somebody lives. So I start out with doing a reading, what I call spiritual prescription, because I tap into, again, if somebody has, fibromyalgia or back issue or whatever, even fatigue or cancer, I get the mental, emotional, and spiritual cause. and this is what I do with what I call the Divine Healing Blueprint and my mentoring program, working with someone. People, what I learned in my practice for years was it was such a disservice to have somebody come in for one session and I go, here, go do this. That's what the doctors do. And people need, especially in this, a step-by-step plan. They need to be taken by the hand. They need to be have accountability and take, okay, baby steps. I'm going to do this first, and then I'm going to integrate that, and then I'm going to do this next, and then I'm going to, so it is the spiritual. It is a spiritual journey, but I don't believe that the healing has to take a long time. That we can learn these. I reversed cancer in 2 months.
Wow.
So it can happen very, very quickly.
Gotcha.
But you have to have a plan, and if you keep just going to practitioners and they just, you get confused. You're like, well, which one's right? Which one do I do? I can't do all of this. It's too expensive.
Right.
It's too this. It's too that. And it's true because you don't see a lasting result because you're not in the equation from within.
Right.
So that's where I start. I start with readings with people on the phone, and then we go into getting clarity. Where am I now? How did I get here? And where is it that I want to be? If I'm not where I want to be, where is it that I want to be? And having that definition. You wouldn't just get in your car and start driving to California. You would make a plan. The people really, where I found where people were falling down was there was no plan.
Right.
So it's getting that clarity, getting to the cause, getting to the consciousness and the vibration, and how do I shift this? How do I shift this vibration or this consciousness? And then having the courage, having that courage to stay accountable to yourself and stick with it. And I do find a lot of people, that's why I start with that. I use it against them. I absolutely do. Because in the very beginning, we set our goals. You set your goals. And then when they fall down, I pick them back up and I say, okay, now this is what you told me that you wanted to do. Part of the work that we do is values. If these are your top 5 values, when you make a decision that isn't based on your values, you're going against yourself.
Right.
And then you're piling guilt and shame on to an already bad situation.
Right.
So it's having somebody there that, lifts you back up and reminds you of what you said you wanted according to your values, according to your plan, and getting you where you need to go, where you want to go.
That's great. So, Martha, if our audience wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
They can go to my website, marthablessing.com.
Okay.
Or they can email me, martha@marthablessing.com.
Awesome. And we will post that link on our podcast page and as part of the show notes. And it was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Absolutely, Martha.
Thank you.
Yep. And
we
would
enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And I know we'll stay in touch and, would love to circle back at some point and get you back on the podcast and hear how everything's going with you.
Awesome. Sounds great.